Drawing inspiration from movies, games, or even other artists we look up to has always been the natural instinct of many artists regardless of medium. We instinctually tend to copy the things we enjoy most, both consciously and subconsciously. According to my research, aka googling why do we mimic things, this could be caused by something called mirror neurons. Without getting all sciencey, because honestly I have no business trying to do that, this boils down to understanding other people, their emotions, or simply just learning from them. My mirror neurons began firing off when I saw Yuming Lee's art style, which I'll be studying during this video while telling you a bit about the artist herself, my understanding of her style, and my experience learning from it while working on a piece of my own. At the end of the video, I'll also give my opinion on whether or not there's actual value in copying another artist and what differentiates ethical thievery from actual thievery in art. So stay tuned for that. But before we get into it, you should know who you're taking your advice from. I'm WLOP. I'm a self-taught artist that's been drawing since the dawn of a new era. Here are some of my artworks. If you want to see more, consider subscribing or following my socials. I post whips, full pieces, and general updates there. I also take commissions, and you can find more information on that both on my card or my Ko-Fi. Links in the description. Back to the video. I will also like to apologize right now if I mispronounce this artist's name. I don't speak the language, I don't speak Chinese, so my apologies. I will try my best to pronounce it as well as I can. Yuming Lee describes herself as a visual artist whose practice focuses on the narrativity of images and the visualization of inner world through metaphors and symbols. Drawing inspiration from the fleeting moments in everyday life, she creates visual narratives that invite a moment of pause, feeling, and reflection. And looking at her works, you can absolutely see the truth in those words. If ethereal could take form, I'm sure it would be Yuming Lee's art. To me, her art style is incredibly reminiscent of actual traditional painting. You can see some of the base color peeking through in spots, like in this drawing on the bottom of the wings and on the pillar the angel is leaning on respectively. She's also very generous in where she allows the ambient light to fall, having it very present throughout the piece, mostly where shadows appear. This is because, according to this tutorial she posted on Instagram, she treats shadows as ambient light. In her words, it's as if some light is actually hitting the shadow, except for the really dark areas, where the occlusion happens. She also prefers to use contrasting warm-cold shades in her bounce light, and shadows are often smudged into one another unless the absence of light would be truly noticeable, something that she's also demonstrated in her mini tutorial. Looking at the light, it always seems to fall strongest on the focus point of the piece, and it creates this very visually impactful orange-red underglow. These areas usually have the most clear detail, while zones furthest from interest tend to contain the most loss of detail. Yuming Lee also chooses to utilize shapes to give form and depth rather than heavy detailing. If you were to zoom in on areas that appear to have heavy details, you'll be greeted by a bunch of seemingly random brushstrokes. This technique takes advantage of the brain's ability to fill in space with what it already knows and has a lot of flexible uses. For example, WLOP tends to use it for jewelry, something I have adopted as well, and used in this drawing too. Now that we've properly blessed our eyes with all this gorgeous art, let's attempt to apply some of these things to our own creation. For this study, I'm drawing Archangel Gabriel. He is the third Archangel I've drawn in my mini-series, which you can find on my channel. Right from the beginning, I adopted a painterly approach to this piece by laying down the color zones of the face. I really recommend looking this technique up to better understand it. References help too, and you can also look in the mirror at your own face. Added some redness to the neck, the knuckles, the shoulders, and other areas because I think it looks good. I also added some purple beneath the eyes because I'm personally really in love with eye bags, even when I'm drawing archangels. Blue is scattered throughout the piece, as it is in Yuming Lee's work. After the color zones are settled, I thinly go over the entire thing with my skin tone of choice, then build shadows and light over that until I'm happy with the result. I'd also like to note, the color zones I use for this piece typically only apply to fair skin. For darker skin colors, you'll need to focus more redness towards the forehead, with a warmer yellow in the middle and violet hues on the bottom of the face. I actually added here a reference from Swatches Academy, but I think the best way to study different skin colors would be to just look at people that have that skin color in different lighting. Now for even more rendering. As we've discussed before, Yuming Lee really likes to have color bleeding into her shadows with few exceptions in places that are truly without light. She keeps the skin typically very smooth, while hair, clothes, and any other additions hold a heavy texture. The harsh light, or the most saturated color, is typically found on the face or around the face of the character. Keeping this in mind, I've decided to dust off my airbrush and get to work, using a mixture of that and the lasso tool to create sharper edges or these diffuse shadows that you can see all around Yuming Lee's work, all while keeping in mind that shadows are supposed to be influenced by the ambience just as much as the midtones or the light. During my process, you'll notice that a bit into it, I restarted my work completely. This is because I wasn't happy where it was headed and felt like I could do a lot better. I also found myself deleting sections later on as well. Maybe I was being a little extra picky with this particular piece because I wanted it to live up to the inspiration, but I think it was the right call to make in the end. For the color scheme, I knew I wanted Gabriel to be very bright and welcoming in comparison to the moodier environments that I placed Raphael and Uriel in. This was another challenge for me, as I'm generally not very confident with bright environments. I also thought it would be a good contrast with his robe, which I already set my mind on making blue. This is the warm and cold contrast we were talking about earlier. The background is this really pleasant blue color too. Yuming Lee places her pieces in the void, which looks gorgeous, especially with the violet streaks, but that's not really what I wanted for this piece. And in fact, you can see me trying that and not really liking the result. A dark background like that can really make colors pop, but my colors are already incredibly bright, so I benefited more from a nice blue. At least, that's how I feel. Compared to Yuming Lee, whose drawings tend to have these, we'll say, ghostly features, I enjoy having more detail on the faces of my characters, so I just did that instead. I think my favorite part of this drawing was adding textures to the hair, the robe, and the jewelry. I did this while keeping the areas furthest from the point of interest simple and rough, just to pull the eye easier to his face without the transition being too jarring. Working with Yuming Lee's style as a reference really pushed me out of my comfort zone, especially when it comes to the way I use colors and the way I think about... I'm sorry, that's my kitty. Working with Yuming Lee's style as reference really pushed me out of my comfort zone, especially when it comes to the way I use colors and the way I think about shadows in general. While I didn't very much enjoy the initial rendering process and prefer laying down a dull base, then adding colors on top of that, I feel like I've really grown artistically from this exercise, and look forward to applying some of the learned techniques to my future pieces. So, after working on this piece, is there actual value in copying another artist's style? Yes, of course there is. Without a doubt, copying other artists, stealing little bits and pieces of techniques from them is how you build towards your very own style and identity in art. The topic of an art style is a really heavily debated one, and for good reason. There's a lot to be said on it, so much so that I'm going to dedicate another video entirely to it. It's something I feel very strongly about because it's a term that people, mostly on TikTok, have begun to utilize incredibly wrong. You'll notice that my drawing isn't a one-to-one to Yuming Lee's style, but it was never really meant to be, as that wasn't the nature of the study. My goal was to better understand the techniques used and morph them into something that fits my own approach to art, which I feel like I've achieved. This is what I would consider ethical thievery in art. All artists steal from something else, and it's their own rendition that gives it originality. The more you feed your memory bank, the more you'll have to pull from. Non-ethical thievery in art, in my opinion, is copying another artist's vision one-to-one without disclosing that you've done so. If I were to just redraw one of Yuming Lee's pieces without stating that was the nature of the study and tried to pass it on as my own, well, that's not okay. And just to be clear, I'm not demonizing tracing or even copying a piece for study. Both of these are valid ways to learn, as long as you either disclose that's what you're doing in the first place, or simply don't post it anywhere. You are utterly transparent with the fact that what you just created is not your own. And then pretty much everything that's happening with AI image generation is theft. There's no nuance there. It's honestly just a plague upon the human craft of creation. That's straight up thievery. There's no way to make that right. So, if you are going to steal, be smart about it and steal from many places. And also be ethical about it. Don't claim other people's art as your own, okay? Don't do that. That's meanie bobini moves right there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to leave a like on your way out, it would help me out a ton. Do let me know your thoughts. I'm still kind of feeling my way around scripting for these videos, and this one was a lot more ambitious than my previous one script-wise. But I think it was an improvement overall. And in case we don't see each other again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.